When you hear the word caveman, what do you picture? A shaggy, grunting figure dragging dinner to a smoky cave. A club-wielding brute from cartoons and old movies. It's a fun image, but it's completely wrong. The truth is, early humans were far more brilliant, emotional, and surprisingly familiar. Forget the Flintstones, forget the cliches. These weren't primitive stereotypes. They were strategists, creators, caretakers. They felt joy. They feared loss. They loved deeply. They faced the wild with nothing but instinct, innovation, and each other. They didn't just survive. They painted their stories on cave walls. They sang around fires. They held one another close when the night was cold and unknown. They loved their children. They mourned their dead. And somehow, they passed on something precious, a way to be human. In this video, we'll step into their world, not just to watch, but to understand. You'll see how they hunted, bonded, created art, and shaped the very roots of community and meaning. From survival to spirit, from tools to tenderness. You're about to walk through a day in the life of our ancient ancestors, and by the end, you might feel a little more connected to them, and maybe a little more connected to yourself, because the story of the caveman isn't really about them. It's the story of us. Imagine waking up not to a buzzing phone, but to the fading glow of embers, the rustle of leaves, and distant birdsong echoing through a wild, quiet world. No bed, no blankets, just the firmness of the earth beneath you, or the warmth of animal hides, with your tribe breathing softly a few feet away. This was morning in the Stone Age. You didn't hit snooze. You opened your eyes because you'd made it through the night. Some people slept deep inside caves, others in shelters made from sticks, bones, and hides. In places like Dolní Věstonice, now silent fields in the Czech Republic, archaeologists have found hearths arranged in circles, signs of families drawn to warmth, to safety, to each other. Even then, comfort mattered, togetherness mattered. But waking up wasn't peaceful, it was practical. You scanned the world for danger. Predator tracks, storm clouds, signs of rival clans. The fire had to be fed. Those glowing coals were everything. Let them die, and warmth, safety, and cooked food vanished with them. Every morning was a reset, a chance to start again, with risk humming beneath the surface. Maybe you sipped leftover water. Maybe someone chewed roots or sinew, preparing it to make rope or tools later. Tasks were shared, often without a word, a glance, a nod, a small gesture that said, "You gather, I check the traps, let's move." No coffee rituals, but rituals? Still there. Each breath in that morning air was earned. Each rising sun greeted not just a tribe, but a circle of survivors, people who held each other through the cold, the dark, and the unknown. They didn't just wake up to survive. They woke up because they had. And when that first golden light touched the face of someone you loved, that was the real warmth of the morning. Once the fire was stirred back to life and the morning air filled with breath and smoke, the real mission of the day began. Food. But don't imagine a quick errand. This wasn't a grocery run. It was a gamble, a dance with nature, where the stakes were hunger, survival, and sometimes death. Hunting wasn't chaos, it was strategy. Men formed tight hunting parties. Their weapons, stone-tipped spears, atlatls, bows, were sharpened with precision. They didn't charge blindly into the woods. They moved with memory, with instinct, with a deep, silent understanding of the land. They read the wind, tracked footprints, knew the rhythms of migrating herds. At sites like Boxgrove in England, fossil clues reveal something astonishing. Organized ambushes, kill zones planned like military maneuvers. These weren't brutes, they were tacticians. Meanwhile, the gatherers set out. Women, elders, children, walking under the rising sun, fingers grazing plants, eyes scanning the ground. They weren't just picking berries, they were reading the land like a living map. In tribes like the modern Hadza of Tanzania, gathering provides up to 80% of daily nutrition. This wasn't side work, it was survival, guided by inherited wisdom. They knew which root soothed pain, which leaf cured fever, which berry could kill. And it wasn't all quiet focus. They laughed, they teased, they taught the young how to spot the right colors, the right smells. They shared stories, ghost tales, dream visions, lessons from the night before, because every foraging trip carried more than calories. It carried culture, but nothing was guaranteed. Some hunts failed, some berries spoiled in the rain. Some days the tribe went to bed with empty stomachs. That's why they learned to preserve, smoke meat, hide nuts in pits, store roots in the coolness of caves. In the Stone Age, hunger never disappeared. It just stayed a few steps behind. But through this rhythm, this ancient pulse of hunting and gathering, something else grew stronger: trust. In the silent pause before a spear flew, in the laughter under a berry-laden tree, in every shared risk and every shared meal, the tribe wasn't just feeding bodies, they were feeding what it meant to be human. If food was the fuel of early life, then tools and fire were the engines. And these weren't lucky accidents. They were proof of something far more powerful: intention. Take tools. These weren't just rocks picked up off the ground. They were crafted on purpose. Flint blades so sharp they rival modern surgical steel, stone axes, scrapers, bone awls, and carved spears, each shaped for a reason: to cut, to skin, to build, to survive. To make them meant more than instinct. It meant imagination. It meant foresight. Percussion flaking, chipping one stone with another to create a precise edge, wasn't guesswork. It was skill, passed down over generations. And with each generation, life got a little safer, a little smarter, a little more human. But tools were only half the story. Then came fire. Not just warmth, not just cooked food, but something bigger. Fire was a gathering point, a protector in the dark, a teacher, a symbol. By firelight, wounds were healed, stories were told. Children fell asleep to the crackle of embers and the comfort of whispered legends. But fire wasn't guaranteed. It had to be coaxed, preserved, guarded. One glowing ember could mean the difference between life and death. And the one who carried that ember, they were one of the most trusted in the tribe. Still, humans didn't stop there. They tinkered, they tested, they tried, failed, and tried again. They made bone needles to sew clothes, hooks to catch fish, sinew cords to lash stone to wood. They tanned hides with smoke and fat. They even figured out how to carry fire across miles of wind and rain. They were not wanderers in chaos. They were early engineers, problem solvers, inventors. They didn't just react to the world, they reshaped it. From mammoth bone shelters to underground meat storage, every challenge sparked a question. Every question sparked a solution. That's not just survival, that's innovation. Every flint chip, every fire lit in the storm, every improvement passed down through time. It wasn't just survival, it was the beginning of progress. So, when we ask, what did cavemen really do all day? Part of the answer is this: they built the future with their hands, with their minds, with every spark that refused to die. When the hunt was over, when the fire burned steady and the air smelled of wood smoke and roasted meat, they rested. But rest didn't just mean sleep. It meant connection. It meant reflection. It meant something far more human than we often imagine. Let's begin with the sacred. Across ancient burial sites, from Africa to Europe, archaeologists have found something astonishing. Bodies gently laid to rest. Not discarded, not forgotten, but honored. Tools beside them, shell beads around their necks, flowers pressed into the soil. This wasn't just survival, it was ceremony. A quiet but powerful sign that even 40,000 years ago, humans sensed something beyond the physical. They may have believed in spirits, in an afterlife, in the soul, because they didn't just live, they remembered. And that, in itself, is monumental. Then came the stories. Imagine it, a group gathered close to the fire, embers flickering, shadows dancing on the cave walls. elders retelling the great buffalo hunt, whispered warnings for the children, spirits invoked, heroes named, lessons passed on. There were no books, no screens. This was their cinema, their school, their memory. Oral tradition was the bloodstream of culture, how knowledge moved from one generation to the next. But it didn't stop at words. They also made art. Think of the Lascaux caves, galloping horses, bison mid-charge, handprints pressed into ancient stone. These weren't decorations, they were symbols, prayers perhaps, visions maybe, or both. Some say painting a successful hunt helped it come true. Others believe it was a sacred ritual, a moment of connection with the unknown. What's certain is this: these early humans imagined. They created beauty without needing to, which means they felt. And they didn't stop there. They made flutes from bird bones. They danced around firelight. They moved to rhythms that echoed into the night. Maybe the music was spiritual. Maybe it was healing. Or maybe it was simply joy. But either way, science for 3 lands of the dead. It meant they found harmony in a world that often demanded silence. So, what did cavemen really do all day? Yes, they hunted. Yes, they fought to survive. But they also grieved for their dead, danced beneath the moon, sang their fears away, told stories that still echo across time. And they asked the same questions we still ask today. Why are we here? What happens when we're gone? And how do we stay connected in a world so wild and uncertain? Now let's get into something a little more personal. Relationships. What did family life look like 30,000 years ago? How did early humans raise their children? Who hunted? Who stayed behind? And did gender roles even matter when survival was on the line? Let's clear something up. The idea that men hunted and women gathered, it's not entirely wrong, but it's wildly oversimplified. Recent discoveries suggest something more balanced. Women hunted, especially when every pair of hands counted. And men? They gathered, they cooked, they cared for children when needed. Because survival didn't care about stereotypes, it cared about skills, strength, circumstance. Caveman life wasn't about rigid roles, it was about teamwork. Imagine a small tribe, maybe 25 to 50 people. Everyone knew each other's strengths. Everyone had a role. This wasn't a crowd of strangers. It was a tribe, a survival unit, a chosen family. And when it came to raising kids, it wasn't a 1 or 2 person job. It was a group effort. Anthropologists call it alloparenting. Grandparents, aunts, uncles, older siblings. Everyone helped raise the young. Why? Because human babies are fragile. They need years of care and attention. No one could do that alone. It was community parenting, and it worked. It's one of the reasons we're still here. So, did they fall in love? Probably. Just not in the way we imagine. No candlelit dinners, no handwritten love notes. But pair bonding evolved, because having a trusted partner meant more food, more protection, and a better chance your children would survive. And the emotions? They were real. We see grief in burials, connection in cave art, and in today's hunter-gatherer tribes, we see laughter, teasing, jealousy, and affection. They didn't just mate, they bonded, they felt. Because even in the harshest environments, love still mattered. Now, they weren't perfect. There were conflicts, disagreements, rivalries, but cooperation wasn't optional. It was essential. Conflicts had to be resolved. Food had to be shared. Children had to be protected. And here's the thing, that ability to bond, to communicate, to connect, may be exactly why we survived, while other human species didn't. So no, cavemen weren't just grunting loners, dragging clubs through the mud. They were partners, parents. Let's talk about what truly separated our ancestors from every other creature on Earth. It wasn't just strength. It wasn't just instinct. It was imagination. The ability to see possibility where others saw limitation. Think about it. A rock? Most animals ignore it. But a human? They shaped it. They didn't just pick up stones and hope for the best. They learned which ones chipped cleanly, which ones could be sharpened to a razor's edge.
edges so fine some rival surgical blades today. They made hand axes, scrapers, carving tools, spearheads, each crafted for a purpose: hunting, skinning, cutting, digging, defending. Every gesture was intentional, every innovation earned. This wasn't luck, it wasn't guesswork, it was engineering. Trial and error became tradition. Mistakes turned into blueprints. And over time, through tools, humans unlocked something no other species had ever achieved: control over their environment. Then came fire, not just for warmth, not just for cooking, but for connection. Picture it, the glow of a fire in the wilderness, drawing people in, holding back the dark, extending the day beyond the setting sun. Around the fire, something changed. Knowledge was passed down. Children listened. Elders taught. Myths were born. Lessons remembered. Some researchers believe fire shaped our very brains, because once our basic needs were met, we had something priceless: time to think, to talk, to dream. And we didn't stop there. We carved bone needles to sew warm clothes, crafted fish hooks to master rivers and lakes, used animal hides to carry food and water, made flutes from bird bones, to play, to heal, maybe to worship. We mixed pigments for cave art, using stencils, brushes, and dusted powders. That's not just survival, that's creativity, expression, innovation. Because invention wasn't a luxury, it was instinct. Humans saw the world not just for what it was, but for what it could be. A stick? Not just wood. A potential spear. A rock? Not rubble. A tool waiting to be born. Fire? Not just heat, but transformation. So, when we ask, what did cavemen really do all day? The answer is simple. They adapted. They imagined. They invented the future. And that's why you're not sitting in a cave right now, chewing raw meat with a chipped flint. You're holding a smartphone, streaming ideas across the globe, because they started the fire, and we've been building on it ever since.
Let's step away from the hunting trails, away from the flicker of firelight and the scent of cooked meat, and into something deeper, the soul of early humanity. Because cavemen didn't just eat, survive, and move on. They believed, they wondered, they searched for meaning in a world they didn't fully understand. Take the ancient cave paintings of Lascaux, Chauvet, and Altamira. These weren't idle doodles. They were created deep inside the earth, hundreds of feet from the surface, by torchlight, in echoing chambers, far from daily life. Why go through all that trouble? Because these caves weren't just canvases. They were temples. The repetition of animals, the symbols etched again and again, the handprints pressed like signatures through time. These weren't just pictures, they were prayers. Maybe to summon a successful hunt, maybe to honor the spirit of the animals they depended on, maybe just to make sense of the unknown. Whatever the reason, they meant something. And it wasn't just in their art. Some of the earliest human graves date back over 100,000 years. Bodies laid gently in curled positions, dusted with red ochre, buried with beads, shells, and tools. Why? Because they grieved. They believed, somehow, that death wasn't the end, that the ones they lost still mattered, still traveled, still needed honor. That's not biology, that's spirituality. Now, imagine a group huddled around a fire as the stars blink awake above them. A child asks, "Why does the moon change shape?" Or, "What happens when we die?" And someone, an elder, a dreamer, a shaman, tells a story about the sky being the back of a great beast, about spirits walking the forest at night, about ancestors watching through firelight and smoke. These weren't just bedtime tales. They were blueprints for life, stories that helped them understand lightning, hunger, grief, that taught morals, explained danger, preserved wisdom. Because in a chaotic world, myths brought order, and in a harsh world, ritual brought comfort. Some individuals, maybe those with vivid dreams or mysterious illness, took took on special roles. They weren't priests in robes, but they were bridges between the tribe and the unknown, between nature and the numinous. They read patterns in stars, interpreted sickness, guided rituals, offered protection from the spirits they believed walked beside them. They were early shamans, mystics, guides, and their power came not from strength, but from meaning. Now, you might ask, how could they believe all this without science? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe belief wasn't about proof. Maybe it was about hope. When your survival depends on weather, luck, and fragile health, you need more than tools. You need meaning. And that's what spirituality gave them. So yes, early humans believed. They danced, they painted, they buried their dead with care. They looked up at the stars and whispered stories into the fire, not because they had to, but because they needed to understand. Where do we come from? Where do we go? And what does it all mean? And in asking those questions, they became us. Let's clear something up. Cavemen weren't wandering loners, dragging clubs through the wilderness. They were social beings, and if there was one thing their survival depended on above all else, it was community. Picture a small group, maybe 20 to 50 people, moving together across wild, untamed landscapes. Not just living side by side, but living for each other. Parents, elders, siblings, friends. Newborns clinging to warm bodies. Children learning through play and imitation. This was a tribe in every sense of the word. They didn't just share shelter and food, they shared laughter, struggles, stories, and dreams. And this wasn't some rigid system. It was flexible, fair, functional. You contributed what you could. The strongest hunted, the keen-eyed tracked movement in the brush, the clever-shaped tools. The wise remembered the lessons of hard winters, the nurturing cared for the sick and the young. And the children, they learned by doing, through games, observation, and play. Status wasn't based on wealth or dominance. It was based on contribution. If you didn't share food, you lost respect. If you didn't pull your weight, trust faded fast. This was teamwork for survival, and no one made it alone. These weren't lawless bands. They had norms, boundaries, even perhaps a form of democracy. Groups may have voted on when to move camp, on who could partner with whom, on how to resolve conflict, how to divide meat, how to care for the wounded. They didn't have courts. They had conversations around fires, in circles, eye to eye, because cooperation wasn't optional. It was the glue of survival, and it wasn't just logistics. It was love. We know this because archaeologists have found skeletons of people who lived for years with broken bones and disabilities, injuries they could never have survived on their own. Someone had to carry them, feed them, protect them. That's not instinct. That's empathy. It means they didn't just protect the strong, they protected each other. Think about this. They shared food, but also grief when someone died. They told stories, but also joked, teased, flirted. They sat in silence. They celebrated hunts. They mourned losses. They danced. They bonded. These weren't primitive interactions. They were deeply human ones, because at the heart of it all, we've always wanted the same things: to be seen, to be useful, to be part of something bigger than ourselves. Today we use phones, texts, and Zoom. Back then, they used stories, eye contact, and firelight. But the need to connect, to belong, to matter, that hasn't changed at all. So what did cavemen really do all day? Yes, they hunted, they gathered, they survived. But more than that, they lived. They raised families. They told stories. They carved symbols into stone that would outlive them by tens of thousands of years. They danced. They laughed. They protected one another. And night after night, they sat by the fire, building the foundation of humanity, one ember at a time. It might feel like their world is long gone, but the truth is, we are still them. We wake up with the same needs they had: to connect, to contribute, to feel safe, seen, and understood. Our office politics, that's tribal strategy. Our craving for social media likes, modern echoes of ancient group approval. Our love of stories, our fear of rejection, even our morning rituals, Stone Age instincts in high-tech clothes. They lived without maps or manuals. They made meaning without myths written down.
They invented culture before there was even a word for it. They raised children without calendars, solved problems without blueprints, built homes without walls, and communities without contracts. They were engineers of instinct, artists of survival, explorers of the unknown. And whether they knew it or not, they were writing the first chapter of a story we're still living today. So next time you feel disconnected or lost in the noise of modern life, remember this: that urge to protect your friends, that's ancient. That spark to create something beautiful, that's primal. That need to belong, that's not weakness. That's the caveman in you, calling home. Because no matter how many skyscrapers we build, no matter how many screens we scroll, we are still the children of firelight and stone. We still carry the DNA of those who once looked at the stars and asked the same question we do now: what does it mean to live a meaningful life? And their answer? It wasn't in the hunt, it was in the sharing of the meat. It wasn't in the escape from danger, it was in the holding of each other. It wasn't just about surviving, it was about belonging. So what did cavemen really do all day? They laid the groundwork for who we are, not just with their hands, but with their hearts.